Welcome to Cujo Sound and Game Audio Talk. This time, it's about Red Dead Redemption. In Red Dead Redemption 2, there are a few things to mention about the sound design. Still, as I've said in the previous two videos, and basically in any video about any video game on this channel, it's not because it's bad, there's just something to talk about. How much detail are we as sound designers to put into any sound, especially when dealing with something similar to proximity effect? If you record something at a certain distance, you get that distance proximity effect. The problem with that is that if you then get too close, you get a lot of the frequencies and other things in that recording. It's a very simplified way of explaining the proximity effect. My old music teacher used to call this the microphone spot. It's a spot where you're supposed to hold the microphone to get all nuances from your voice when you're singing. So if you're singing and it's all about amplitude and as much effect as possible, sure, go ahead. Eat the microphone as they do on live recordings of bands, like Megadeth and so on. But if you want something to sound like it's 2-3 meters away, then recording it at that actual distance is a lot easier than recording it closer and then trying to filter your way out of it. But the problem is then, what if we can get closer or further away? Here in Red Dead Redemption 2, we have an example. All fireplaces, bonfires, and so on, they're all sounding very nice if your camera is about a couple meters away from it.
Morning, sir.
Excuse me, ma'am.
If you mash your camera into the face of the fire, it still sounds like it's a couple meters away, simply because the recording is actually probably that. And a couple of meters, that's about 6 to 7 feet for you Americans. Why is that? Most likely because the recording process of this sound takes place a few meters away from the actual fire that it's been recording. A good rule of thumb here is that, sure, you can manipulate and polish this kind of sound. It's like polishing a turd.
Morning to you. Come on.
But it will always be a turd.
So far.
Same goes for this here. It's not a bad recording, and this is not a turd at all, but because it's recorded a few meters away from the actual fire, it will always sound like it's a few meters away, regardless of how you treat it. Always. But then again, if you record this bonfire too close, you will experience the joy of trying to remove the low frequencies and all those other effects. And that's just as difficult, it takes just as much time, and the result is even more that this becomes a turd. Because once you move away from the source, if it's too closely recorded, it won't sound like it's fading away in the distance just by low passing and controlling the volume. It will always sound a little different from if you actually recorded the thing a couple of meters away from the source. Red Dead Redemption 2 and the previous Rockstar games would normally have most of their ambient sounds built from hundreds of 3D sources placed around the game, relying on those to be creating the soundscape rather than a pre-mixed 2D soundscape. The same goes for this game, but if you go to the more secluded areas of any location, or let's say here in Saint Denis, I believe I hear some sort of mix down. That's not the same as mixing it all through a certain bus and then filtering that bus only or fading out that bus, but it's almost like the soundscape of this city is trying to calculate what 3D sounds are plausible that you would be hearing right now, and then sort of creates a baked soundscape from that. I found this one location. It's actually just above the place in the last video where I showed that you could hear piano music in the background that is meant to lure you upstairs to investigate it. Walking through this door, it is like all the sounds from the just mentioned mixdown are faded out nicely. But the actually physical 3D sounds will continue to play, like this church bell here. Or this train sound, which is abruptly cut off for a reason unknown. Of course, we cannot say why, because we don't have access to the engine that they are doing this on. But this tells me that something interesting is going on under the hood that treats these sounds differently, and it's part of a very big setup that makes the world believable. Even if you're in a place where probably all NPCs, trains and horse carriages and church bells and so on are culled in graphics, and maybe they don't even exist in the code in the physical world because they only spawn once you leave, it's still there in the soundscape. And this is really interesting, and I'm trying to really figure out how this is done. And I've only been able to find this one place where I can reproduce any kind of ambient fade that was this obvious, and sounds that are cut off. So again, this game is rock solid well made. Thank you for watching Cujo Sound and Game Audio Talk. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up or even subscribe if you aren't already. Or check out the channel for a lot of other videos about game audio talk and tutorials on how to make video game audio. If you really like the content that I provide on this channel, consider subscribing to me on patreon.com/Cujo Sound, where you for as little as $1 a month can help me sustain this channel and the time I take off to create all this content. I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Cujo Sound, signing out.